I'm on an airplane. I'm going to a conference. I've learned to protect future Jamie. And so whenever I make an appointment or I make a reservation, I put the details in my calendar so that I have the reservation number. I don't have to go looking for it. If I go to a potluck, I know what I signed up to bring because I will inevitably forget. So I am literally on the runway. I look at my calendar to see where my hotel is, and there is nothing in my calendar. And then I start panicking and going through, and I'm literally like on the runway, panicking, looking through it, can't find a reservation. I even have an opportunity to call the hotel. They don't have a reservation, but I also don't have the time to process. So thankfully, now I'm aware. I call my boyfriend and I'm like, I did not make a hotel reservation. Can you do this for me?
Welcome to Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerb, and I have ADHD. On this podcast, I dig into the tools, tactics, and best practices to help you work with your ADHD brain. Hey team, this week I'm talking with Jami Shapiro, ADHD coach, founder of Silver Linings Transitions, and host of the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. Jami has also recently published her book, This Explains So Much, which dives into the world of undiagnosed ADHD in people over 50. Jami brings a wealth of experience from her work helping older adults downsize and organize their lives. In our conversation, we dig into what aging looks like with ADHD, from memory changes to social isolation, and how curiosity, compassion, and the power of community can make a huge difference. We get into the challenges of different stages of life, how ADHD can be mistaken for dementia, and what it means to build understanding across generations. I think this is definitely an episode for everyone, as no matter how you slice it, we're all going to be facing these issues someday. And because of the genetic nature of ADHD, you likely already have someone in your life dealing with some of these issues. If you'd like to follow along the show notes page, you can find that at hackingyouradhd.com/256. All right, keep on listening to find out how to prepare future you to thrive with ADHD at any age. Right, well, it's great to have you here with us today, and I was wondering if you could just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Oh gosh, that's a hard question for someone with ADHD. A little bit about myself. So I am Jami Shapiro, and I am the host of the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. And I've written a book that has recently come out. Said that is called "This Explains So Much." It's understanding undiagnosed ADHD for those who have too much, feel too much, or have been told they are too much. Um, and I'm very clear that it's undiagnosed ADHD, but it's for people over 50, specifically women who were, under the belief that ADHD was only the hyperactive little boy that we would outgrow. And so you have a whole generation of people who were not diagnosed. And how I got into the whole ADHD conversation. So I started my own business in San Diego called Silver Linings Transitions as a senior move management and home organizing company back in 2014. In 2015, my oldest child came to me insisting that they be evaluated for ADHD. And, I had a hyperactive little brother who had to be put on Ritalin in the 80s to be in the classroom. And I said, "You don't have ADHD. You've been reading since you were 3 years old," because I couldn't sit still to read until second grade. So, just like a lot of people were in the psychiatrist's office, they're asking a series of questions. And I looked at the psychiatrist as I'm answering the questions for Will, and I'm like, I'm answering more yeses for me. Do I have ADHD? Because again, it's the hyperactive little boy. And so at that time, I am starting my own business. I have 3 children and I'm going through a divorce. So I'm like, okay, I'm 45 years old. I have ADHD. Okay, it doesn't matter. Like I'm here I am. I've started a business. I graduated college with high honors. Why does it matter? But it wasn't until I realized a little less than 2 years ago that my 77-year-old mother had ADHD that I jumped into the ADHD space and became an ADHD coach and brought in the work that I was doing, working with seniors who were decluttering and downsizing. Now understanding, looking at a lot of them and realizing they probably had undiagnosed ADHD, which was contributing to the clutter and the decision fatigue and, deferring the big projects. And it's just changed my whole world understanding the impact of ADHD. So that was a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is such an interesting topic to get into because it is, I mean, as we were talking about before we started recording, was that, this is something that everyone's going to age into. Like, you don't get to just not age, even though, time feels very amorphous and, doesn't feel like it exists for us. It still happens.
Right. And we with our now and not now, right? A lot of people with ADHD are not looking at what it's going to mean to hopefully retire with ADHD, but also aging and the challenges of aging with, by the way, cognitive decline that's normal for a neurotypical. And now you bring in some ADHD into the mix. And so my we were talking about my topic at the International ADHD conference is for seniors and future seniors, because hopefully all of us with ADHD will one day be seniors with ADHD.
Yeah. I mean, we do have like the lower life expectancy with all that and stuff, but I mean, even with that, we're going to get older, and
A lot of my work,
challenges
by the
are going
way,
to change.
talks about, I think there's this misconception that we have a lower life expectancy because of our ADHD, but it's because of our choices that we make with ADHD. Okay, I just wanted to make sure your audience knew that, because
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's a and fantastic caveat there, because yes, the conscientiousness part of ADHD, where we're not really, if we're not taking care of ourselves because of ADHD, that's going to have a big impact.
correct. As it does in regular aging, not sleeping properly, not eating properly, not moving your body. But we also have the distractibility factor. So, I mean, listen, if you had seen any of my cars, before I even knew I had ADHD, they have dings on them. And I've had a few car accidents, and, that's an ADHD link to, a shorter life expectancy, among other reasons.
Yeah, there's so many factors that go into it, and it's just like, oh yeah, your ADHD just adds on to how these things can build up. Um, yeah, and this is making me think of a question that I've been pondering for this couple weeks recently because of a post I saw online asking, like, does ADHD get harder as you get older? And I was like, this is a really interesting question, because yes and no is what I kind of how I viewed it.
Hmm. Yeah. So when you host a podcast, and you know this, you get to talk to industry experts and you learn so much more. And so I had Jeff Copper dig coaching on my podcast, and he came up with, and I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm not even going to try it, but it's something paradox. And he basically says that when you have ADHD, you like to process verbally, you like to bounce ideas off of another person, and it helps you plan your day. And when you are, say, a senior, then you probably don't have children at home, you may not be working, you may or may not have a spouse, and if you're living alone, you don't have that other person who you can bounce ideas off of. And then you also are impacted by social isolation, which isn't good for any of us. And then you do have the normal cognitive decline. So in that way, I would say, ADHD, does work against us as we age. But on the flip side, we're naturally curious, and curiosity is said to extend our life because we are more engaged with other people. We're always learning. So, it's both. Exactly what you said. It's both.
Yeah, and because we're like, I mean, we're facing different challenges. Like, I view my ADHD is so different from in my 20s versus now when I'm like entering my 40s. I have vastly different life problems, and so then the way my ADHD manifests is very different, and there's very different consequences where I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I'm like remembering all these school things and doing all these things for my kids, versus, in the 20s where I'm like, well, I can kind of get away with a lot of that stuff where I'm not late to things, and that doesn't work as well in my 40s, and that needs to be more of a focus.
Hmm. And I will also say for women, that perimenopause, when because of estrogen being pro-cognitive, I see a lot of women, who say that they totally held it together until they got to that point where, it just the estrogen and the lack of really impacted them. In fact, I heard something that is so fascinating, and I don't know if you've heard this before, but I've heard that the Salem witch trials, if you look back to the Salem witch trials, the age that those women would have been persecuted for not being able to follow Puritan values and sit still and be in church quietly was around the age of 40. And what happens to women around the age of 40?
Mm, that's it's an interest. I mean, I took an entire class about the Salem witch trials, and so I read like 4 or 5 books. I don't remember a lot of them, but I remember them like there's just so many theories about what was going on there.
Right. Well, if you go to AI and you just Google just ask Chad or Claude, what traits in the people who were persecuted during the Salem witch trials are consistent with ADHD, and you'll be like blown away.
Yeah, I'm sure because it's one of those things where historically, like ADHD has been like this outside group because we are doing things differently. And it's still, even now, people have a lot of trouble integrating completely with neurotypical people because we often view the world differently and we don't want to. We have, stuff where we are kind of anti-authoritarianism and being like, yeah, that authority, I don't, why are they in charge? I don't get it. And challenging that, I can see being a big factor in people being like, well, you used to be so submissive and now you're talking that back at me. Well, that must be the devil.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look at, when they used to kill people who had ADHD because they thought that they didn't realize that it was, a brain wiring. They thought they were possessed. And so I actually talk about that in my own book, is the history of ADHD and, when they called it minimal brain function and, all of that before it was even hyperkinetic.
Yeah, it's funny to just, yeah, people being like, ADHD is a new thing. It's like, no, it's been around for quite a while.
Yeah.
Just because
With
it was called something different or even just not called something
or
that
not
still there.
recognized, and so many of us masked. But yeah, I actually was listening to Jay Shetty interview Dr. Daniel Iman, and that he actually was talking about how you could trace biblical references to ADHD, like people who were expressing ADHD traits back in biblical days. And I personally think that I think we're brilliant. I think that, we do have a different brain wiring. But if you think back to cavemen days, when you had to have somebody scanning the environment to make sure that everything was safe for everybody else, who do you think they relied on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's something where individualism with currently is hurting ADHD, but as a community, having people that have their brains wired differently is a huge advantage as a community.
And in corporations and, everything, to be able to connect things that other people don't see. And I never realized that was, attributable to my ADHD. I was thought, oh, I can make all these connections. I love the MacGyver reference that, we sort of had that MacGyver brain where we could just like piece things together. And yeah.
Yeah, it's always been one of the things I've viewed as like the biggest strength from ADHD, is just this being able to see these connections that other people don't see. And it often feels so obvious to us. Right? Well, yeah,
Uh-huh.
of course those two things go together. Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't that?
We will watch a movie. My boyfriend and I will watch a movie, and I'll tell him what's going to happen. He's like, "How did you know that?" I'm like, "Come on, like, come on."
Yeah, the story wouldn't work if did anything else happen. It would be a bad show.
And P.S., I'm not only watching that movie, but I'm also playing my game because I can't just sit still and focus on the television.
Hmm. Yeah, or doing the thing where I'm like, oh, I recognize that person. Where do I recognize them from? Let's pop up IMDb real quick,
Oh, of course. Yep. Yeah.
and then go down that rabbit hole. While I'm like, oh yeah, and they were also in this and
Uh
this.
huh. Yeah.
I do that a lot with my watching shows with my kids and being like, hey, that guy also voiced uh this other character that and he does this and he's in Spider-Man, and they're like, what?
I do that with
Yeah.
age because now that I'm 55, and I see these people and I want to figure out where they are in relation to my age. And so I'm constantly looking up, how old they were when they filmed and blah, blah, blah.
Oh yeah, and it is one of the funny things with aging where you're like, oh my god, that person is young. How is how are they playing an adult with kids now?
Uh-huh. Well, I think that to myself. I'm like, who are these people calling me mom? Like, it just doesn't, because my oldest is 24.
Mhm. Yeah, I can imagine the just with our like lack of seeing time being like, yeah, how did this happen?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, even with my oldest is 10, and I still like I'm like, when she hit double digits, I was like, that's what?
And it flies. My baby is a senior in high school, and it's just like a blink of an eye, and I'm like, oh my, it's just, yeah, it's crazy. And I don't think that's just an ADHD thing. I think that's as we have children and we're aging and we're just going through the all of the things in life. It's sort of flying by. So I can't speak for a neurotypical person because I am not, but I imagine that that's a similar experience.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely heard the all the stuff of like, yeah, you only have your kids for 18 years and it flies by, and it's not like you kind of hope my kids are still going to be in my life after they turn 18, but I know they will have their own lives and all that then. But um, so as we're talking about this, I am kind of wondering, are there like certain things you are seeing in like more seniors and just as you age, like different. So we talked earlier about like, there's different challenges, but what are the like, are there some commonalities of these differences in ADHD symptoms that you're seeing?
Oh, what's fascinating is that, um, and again, and you know that when you have an interest in something that you sort of just focus on it. So I filter everything, through the lens of aging with ADHD. So there, Dr. David Goodman has said 1 in 5 memory care clinics are routinely screening for ADHD. 1 in 5. But if you look at the early symptoms of early onset dementia or the early stages of dementia, um, forgetting names, misplacing items, um, short term memory issues. Like, what else is that?
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Right. And so you do have people who are not correctly being diagnosed, who it's normal, they think it's normal aging, and no, it's actually ADHD. So, and I also think there is a word, and this is why I'm so passionate about it. There is a stage in life now identified as gerotranscendence. And, Eric Erickson had his 8 stages of life. He's a famous sociologist. And when he and his wife got into their 80s, he realized that he had not really talked about the stage of life when we are reflecting on our lives and making peace with our past and making peace with our relationships. And if you've lived your entire life with undiagnosed ADHD or not realizing that so many of your challenges were ADHD, um, finding out that you have ADHD and putting the pieces together, I'm seeing with my own mom, our whole relationship has changed, because I now understand that my mom really was doing the best that she could be doing. And I honestly believe if I hadn't connected the dots that she had ADHD and realized that I was persecuting her, just like we persecute all of those people that we say, why can't you get it together? Why can't you, that it was really because she was never properly treated. And I do think that there's going to be a relief, but also a grief in not having those tools and that understanding.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've talked to so many people that were, late in life diagnosed, and there's just this like, what could have my life have been had I known? Could I have had, better relationships? Could I have, you know, actually followed through with something if I could, have been medicated and done all the things that would have made me so that I could have had that career that I really wanted?
Yeah, I have to share, this is a huge thing that hit me. So I was on a trip. I was presenting at a conference. I had not really seen my boyfriend for a week. I got back, and he kind of picked a fight with me. And actually, believe it or not, it was about ADHD because I was giving advice to the stranger next to me on the airplane. And, because now, you write a book about the topic, you think you know the topic. And so he is a scientist. And so we got into a fight, and I did not sleep well that night because, I'm extra sensitive. So I, of course, start spinning. Now, we've been together 5 years. We own a home together, but I automatically start thinking, what if, if we can't stay together? I mean, I take it down, the doom spiral as you're nodding your head, you get it. And then I actually was talking to my mom because we've struggled in our relationship because I would say something to my mom and she would blow it out of proportion and I would get frustrated. And now I realize we're both doing it, you know?
Yeah, and it's really hard to extend that grace to someone else when it hasn't been extended to you. And even though it's so important to do, where you're like, oh, if I come at this with empathy, this is going to be, I mean, relationships are hard, but if you try to go, hey, you know, me and my mom, we're on the same team. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's right. I want us to not fight through this. But this is, it's hard to do that where you're like, but you're not doing it for me.
And I will also say, being raised by two ADHD parents, who, by the way, were also raised by undiagnosed ADHD parents, there is a lot of emotional dysregulation and parentification, and that is passed down. And so the reality is, as a child, you want better, and as my mom wanted better, and we had family that didn't have the capacity. So that also contributes to the dynamics that go on and why we do have such strange relationships and why it's understanding ADHD and extending that grace to them and just realizing I'm doing the same thing my mom is doing in my relationships. And when you see it that way, it really it has. I mean, it's transform is the big word, but it really is transformative.
Yeah. And this is also just making me think about all the times where I'm like, seeing my wife do something and being like, you're being just like your mother, but I'm not going to tell you that because that's going to go bad for everyone involved here. But that's what's happening here.
There's an expression: you can be right or you can be happy. I actually said that to my boyfriend the other day. You know, did you really need to take it down to this level? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, I do that with my wife and daughter where I'm like, oh, you guys, you're fighting because you're being so alike right now and you don't even realize it, and being like, hey, you guys, you need to step back and be like, there's neither of you need to keep amping this up. But
I'm going to give you some advice that you didn't ask for, that I got it from, I'm divorced, as a lot of people with ADHD, and I do realize the impact that my ADHD had on my first marriage. And, if I had known what I know now, things may have been different. But we did go to a therapist once we had separated because we were just fighting so much. And she said, you can't fight in your amygdala brain. So the best thing that you can do when you're amped up is to just say, hey, we're going to take a time out here. We're going to get back together in 30 minutes once we've both calmed down. We're not going to leave the house, but we're going to leave and go to our own corners. And then if we're able to, to take it down and we're, able to be calm, then we're going to go back to this situation. And if we're not, then we're going to postpone it, but we're going to agree to when the conversation is going to happen. Because, people with ADHD, we don't like ambiguity. I would imagine most people don't like ambiguity. So I thought that was amazing advice. You just cannot fight in your amygdala brain. And I know I actually have two daughters and a trans child. So I know what it's like with girls.
yeah, uh, it's a hard relationship, and I can't imagine how much harder it is when you have like that undiagnosed person in that relationship too, where you're like, because we've all had that experience of people being like, why are you like this? And that may that itself, and because I've had that thought with my kids where I'm like, why are you doing it like this? And I'm like, it's the ADHD, that's why you're doing this. And then that changes the whole dynamic of like what I'm trying to get them to do. But if you can't do that next step, I can imagine just like, there's so many bad emotions and thoughts that you can associate with like, oh, you're doing this to get at me, or because you don't care, or any of the other things that happens because of undiagnosed ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this, just to bring it back to what I think is fantastic that so many older adults are getting diagnosed now, because it was clearly not happening. Even though it existed. I mean, like, I know growing up in the 80s, it was not diagnosed that often. And before then, it was probably just barely happened at all.
Well, or they called it minimal brain function. So the last thing that you wanted was to identify yourself and to even have the word disorder in the title. And then if you look at the silent generation, there's a reason they're called silent. Like they don't talk about anything. And my mother even shared with me that when she needed to go for therapy, my grandfather, didn't want to hear about it, didn't want to know about it. And I am certain that my grandfather had ADHD as well. And he definitely had dysthymia, and it was never addressed. And because there was a stigma about it, and we're still working towards destigmatizing it, but it's especially worse in older generations. And so a lot of them may not even go to get the help that they need or acknowledge it. But the people who are, I think they are benefiting from it. I heard another guest of my podcast, Alan P. Brown, who is the ADD crusher, said that he had an 87-year-old man in his audience who shared that he had been diagnosed at 80 and said that it was the best 7 years of his life.
Well, that's very heartening to hear, because so many people think I mean, like I've had this conversation with a number of people they're like, well, I've lived this much of my life already without being diagnosed. What's the benefit of being diagnosed? And that's a hard question to answer, but it being like, hey, I feel like knowing more about your brain and understanding why you do things is helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't encourage enough. Were you at the last international conference with penholderness as the keynote? So I love the question. I always ask it on my podcast. I ask my guests if they would press the button. Do you remember when he asks everybody, if, would you press the button and not have ADHD? And I have yet to have a guest who would press the button.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment. I mean, I don't know what it would mean to not have ADHD is part of the problem. Like
How old were you when
thought
you were
through it.
diagnosed?
23,
Oh, so you
22?
went your childhood without knowing.
Yeah. I was diagnosed with dyslexia as a kid, like very early on. I even looked back and I had notes that I should be assessed for ADHD, but that was not followed up on apparently. But it was dyslexic, and so then I had in my 20s I realized I had 3 siblings diagnosed with ADHD, and so I was like, oh, I should probably get this checked.
Wow.
And I was like, oh yeah, getting diagnosed, I was like, yeah, that makes total sense based on my childhood. Like I was 100% the super hyperactive child that climbed everything, and now have shifted more into the inattentive side of things.
Sure, and it does more. I was going to say something to you, and I just had one of those. My brain just went completely blank. I know you can relate. My ADHD moment. So hopefully it comes back to me. It was something about climbing. Hopefully it'll come back. It was going to kill me until it does.
Yeah, sometimes I'll have that happen while I'm asking a question, and I just keep adding words. It's like the Office bit where Steve Carell is like, sometimes I just don't know where a sentence is going to end, and I'm like, that's exactly what's happening here. I don't know where this is going.
Oh, to the benefit, why would it matter? It's like, I don't panic. Even my mom and I were having a conversation the other day, and she forgot a word, and she doesn't say I'm having a senior moment anymore. She's like, oh, ADHD moment, and so I think, why does it matter? Like, oh, this is what I would say. Every single day I learn more and more about the impact of ADHD on my life. And so now I can reframe things, and I can I don't know where I was going to go with it because I had another thought, but here's the other thought. I'm on an airplane. I'm going to a conference. I've learned to protect future Jamie. And so whenever I make an appointment or I make a reservation, I put the details in my calendar so that I have the reservation number. I don't have to go looking for it. If I go to a potluck, I know what I signed up to bring because I will inevitably forget. So I am literally on the runway. I look at my calendar to see where my hotel is, and there is nothing in my calendar. And then I start panicking and going through, and I'm literally on the runway, panicking, looking through it, can't find a reservation. I even have an opportunity to call the hotel, they don't have a reservation, but I also don't have the time to process. So thankfully, now I'm aware. I call my boyfriend and I'm like, I did not make a hotel reservation. Can you do this for me? And so I wasn't beating myself. I wasn't embarrassed about it anymore. Like that's just how my brain works. But I also know, again, to make sure that I'm putting those reservations in place. Or now I wear my smartwatch, which I swore up and down I was never going to wear. But now when I start to boil eggs, I don't like go to someone else's house and leave them on my stove.
Yeah, absolutely. Just being like, oh yeah, just remind me in 2 minutes about the eggs.
So yeah, I mean, why would you not want to have those tools? And I used to always, before I knew ADHD's impact, I'd be like, I'm definitely going to remember this. Like I have this great idea come to me, and I wouldn't write it down. And I'm like, oh, it's so good. Of course I won't forget. I forgot every time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things is like, oh, if it was important, I'd remember. It's like, no, that's not how that works.
I think it's also healthy and helpful in relationships to have that understanding now too. Like I said, I think not that my ADHD was the only reason that my marriage didn't work, but it definitely was a contributing factor to it. And so I'm learning now, to go slower and to think of my partner, and to when he needs to communicate with me, okay, I've got to, sit still and give him that attention, or say, hey, this isn't the time, because now I recognize the challenges. So I definitely feel that I wouldn't have the relationship that I have now if I didn't have an understanding of my ADHD and its impact.
Oh, 100%. It's so easy to either beat yourself up about things that you're like, maybe I don't care about this person because, like there's the very much an ADHD system of out of sight, out of mind that can happen with people too, where I've like, like I'm going to go to the conference and I'm probably going to have days where I'm see, like, it's like 8 o'clock. Oh, I can't call home at this point, and I've forgotten about my family for the entire day. Like, never even occurred to me about them.
I don't know about you, but like I've had people on my podcast that I've interviewed, and then I see them and I blank.
Oh, 100%. Like and it's so embarrassing when they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. Or I used to play a lot of ultimate frisbee, and I'd have like these pickup leagues that I would do. And then someone was like, oh yeah, we used to play together, on that team I'm like, have I ever met you before? I don't remember that happening.
Or wait, I played ultimate frisbee? Yeah.
And it's like, what is it? I'm like, it's hard to explain that to someone that's not experiencing that, because it's feels like such a foreign concept, because even having it feels like, oh, I should be able to do this. And that's I mean, as we both know that we shouldn't be using should.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
But
Stop
it is something where,
yourself.
yeah, exactly. But it's hard to stop because your brain's like, no, this is how adults operate. And it's no, not with ADHD.
So I have a question. Were you the person that did the AI presentation last year, where you showed the pictures of a cluttered kitchen and then showed how you could declutter it? I heard you. That was good. I remembered. So I will come back and hear you good.
Yeah. I after that presentation, I was like, man, I could have done a much better job. And so I was like, you know what? This year I'm going to do the same topic, but I'm going to freshen it up and make it like way better. And so far it's looking that way.
And no one's going to remember anyway. So there you go. I'll literally watch a movie that I swore I've never watched before. And then maybe there's a glimpse, and I just have, yeah. So anyway, I love.
Yeah. I was watching a show with my wife, and I'm like, this seems kind of familiar. And then I'm like, she's like, yeah, you might like it. And I like popped it up and I'm like, I've watched the entire season of this already. I don't remember doing that. And it was only like, I'm like, oh yeah, this reminds me of plot of another show I watched.
I love, as I started to say, like, I love talking to other people who get me. So if nothing else, for no other reason, to know that you have ADHD and find your tribe. So my mom was amazing in letting me come into her home and take pictures of her clutter. And, one of the things I used to tell people, because so as I own this company, Silver Linings Transitions, and I will go around and do downsizing presentations and decluttering presentations. Before I had any knowledge of the ADHD, I started doing this. And I would tell people, I come from a family with hoarding disorder. That's literally what I would say. And when I realized that my mom had ADHD, I called my mom. I said, Mom, I have some good news for you. I don't think you have hoarding disorder. I think you have ADHD. And but so she let me into her home and she let me take pictures of all of the piles and the stacks, and the unopened packages and the I'm going to do this someday unfinished projects, which was really brave. And I am so proud of my mom because there's a stigma and a shame. And a lot of us don't invite people into our home. So my mom she lives in a 55 and over community, and she has this woman who's talking about her art. And my mom's like, oh, I'd really like to see it. And the woman says, yeah, I can't have you in my home. I'm a little embarrassed. And my mom's like, oh, let me show you pictures. And so because of that, now my mom can have relationships with people where she gets to be her authentic self and, laugh about it rather than contribute to more social isolation.
Yeah, I have a friend that I do some like web calls with, and we'll joke around, be like with our webcams, we look very put together, and like we have this nice background, and we're like, yeah, and we're like, watch, if I just shift my camera like 10 inches to the right, you're gonna see the mess, and we both do it, and it's hilarious. But it does because you're like, oh yeah, that looks amazing back there, and you're like,
The Zoom room,
yeah, that's
the Zoom zone.
just all, yeah, I can make one wall really look put together, but I can't do an entire room.
What's so funny? I had pictures taken for my website and my coaching and my book. And one of the pictures I had two desks in my office. I had one for my manager and one for me. And one side was my podcast, so it looked really, really, really good. And the desk was neat and tidy and the shelf looked great. And the other side was ADHD. So when the photographer came in to shoot pictures, she actually took one picture of me sitting in the room split, like this is the reality.
Yeah, it's very much like my office right now, where I'm like, this here looks like I've got things fairly well put together, but if you look at the floor, not so much. There's boxes and papers and everything, and I'm like, it's can be hard to get past that shame of like, oh yeah, I could clean that up, but I'm not, and I didn't.
And I used to do my podcast interview in she was 60 at the time in her room because she was the only one that had good, consistent internet connection. And in the beginning, I would, because she basically has piles of clothing. She's a couch that's just a second dresser, and so I would put the virtual screen on it, and then finally, I'm like, hey, I am talking to an audience of people with ADHD. Like, I need to be real. And so I think a lot of us, we're either the perfectionists who have so much anxiety and we feel like everything has to be so neat and tidy. And, and I wouldn't want to be that if I'm being honest, because I think that that's even more pressure. And so when I'm myself, you get to be yourself. And then we actually can have a conversation where the masks come off and we can breathe and.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, there's like the same side of like, yeah, I want to be presenting this side, but I also don't want to pretend like the other sides don't exist. So one question I want to hit before we end is, I'm sure a lot of people are like, yes, this sounds like my mom or my dad, and they're definitely there, but I don't know how to talk to them about the fact that, hey, maybe they should try and get a diagnosis. And those one, do you have advice for people that, are kind of being like, hey, maybe I should try and get that conversation going?
Oh, definitely. Well, first of all, my book, that's exactly who I wrote it for. It was these people and it's very much my story, and people can identify and relate to that. So that's just a little plug for the book. But in terms of having that conversation, because I actually interviewed Dr. Kathleen Nadeau, who wrote the first book on aging with ADHD, and there aren't many out there. And I asked her, if you see it, should you say something? And she said, you've got to be delicate with it. Some people are open to it, and some people are not open. open, but I think that I always lead with the positives. And so when I am approaching somebody, and let me say this, within my family, it's not an issue because we're all very open about it now. But I'm going to just say, talking to somebody maybe I don't know as well, is to say, people with ADHD, we, we tend to have very, very strong social justice conviction. We want the world to be right and fair, and we will stand up for that, which is a really wonderful trait. We're really resilient. We bounce back quickly. And I think it's almost because I make so many mistakes that if I dwelled on it, I'd be absolutely miserable. We're super creative. We can like come up with crazy, brilliant ideas, and we're brilliant. I mean, I always start with, if I ask you if you have ADHD, you need to know that that's like the biggest compliment I can give you. So that's how I feel about it. And so I don't come from a stigmatization. Like my shirt says, Grandma has ADHD. I'm not a grandma though. But my grandma had ADHD, and my kid's grandma has ADHD. And I hope to be a grandma with ADHD. But so I think you've got to start first with let's break down the stigma of it and talk about all of the wonderful traits. But I also have all these unfinished craft projects because I get super excited about something. I buy everything that I need. I lose interest. I move on to the next thing. And then I keep the piles up thinking one day it's going to remind me that I have it, because I will forget that I have it, right? So when they're shaking, and when I'm speaking, I have people come up to me every time I now talk about ADHD in older adults, and they're like, you just saved my marriage, or you just spoke to my soul, or I'm just seeing the heads nod because they're connecting with me. So I think that first and foremost, we've all got to work towards, breaking down the stigma. I definitely think we got to rename it. I hate the word disorder. So that's, we're not going to do that on your podcast, but I think that would be important. But I think just, first, that sandwich, when you give someone a compliment, or you have meat you need to deliver, like there's something that you really want to say, maybe like to your spouse, right? Maybe you're really annoyed that, she keeps leaving her laundry all over the place. Like that's just I'm sure it's you and not her. But, so you would say, honey, I love you. You are so amazing. You're such a great cook. So you start with something really positive. It's really frustrating for me when you are leaving the laundry out, because then it makes me feel like you're waiting for me to do it and your mother doesn't work here. But I really know that we love each other and we're committed to, getting through this laundry problem. Right. So I think that maybe even presenting it as a sandwich that way, like, something great, here's what's going on, and then, something great again.
Yeah. And being like, this is not a bad thing. This is something that we can work through.
And my mom and I sit now and we laugh over ADHD memes, and we are more connected than we have ever been in our entire relationship, and more genuine than we've ever been.
Awesome. Well, we're kind of coming up on time here, so I was wondering if you had any final thoughts that you wanted to leave the audience with.
So if you have a parent with, don't think that ADHD stops when you're 40 or 50 years old, right? So pay attention and look at your parents and give them the gift of understanding ADHD. And also, I would just say that one day, hopefully, you will also be a senior with ADHD. And so please do yourself a favor and come out of your not now mentality and start to really put in place what you're going to need to age successfully. That's financially, physically, all of it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's very important to try and it's hard to be proactive with ADHD, but this is definitely one of the things you want to try and be proactive with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm sure a lot of people related to so many parts of the conversation. I know I did, and I feel like so had a pleasure talking with you.
It was great. I look forward to meeting you again at conference.
Thanks again to Jami for coming on the show, and thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end. Before you go, though, let's do a quick rundown of today's top tips. 1. Many symptoms that get labeled as senior moments, like forgetting names, losing track of appointments, or misplacing items, can actually be long-standing ADHD traits that are finally being noticed. Forgetfulness that comes from ADHD doesn't need memory care protocols. Instead, it needs ADHD strategies such as reminders, structure, external cues, and tools like smartwatches or calendars that really help with ADHD. 2. As we age, we can risk drifting into social isolation, and this can be especially true with ADHD. We already struggle with time blindness, motivation, and these things can lead to dropping the ball on keeping up with friends and family. This means it's important that we're scheduling regular check-ins with our friends and doing things like joining a hobby or social group. 3. We can revisit our relationships and recognize that our parents or kids with ADHD were just trying their best. Reframing these patterns can transform your relationship. Instead of replaying the same old fights, you can start from a place of compassion. And it's not about forgiving the past, it's about giving context and finding ways to move forward with that relationship. Alright, that's it. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Feel free to connect with me over at hackingYourADHD.com/contact. If you'd like links or to read this episode's transcript, you can go to the show notes page at hackingYourADHD.com/256. And if you'd like even more Hacking Your ADHD, be sure to sign up for my newsletter, Any and All Distractions, which comes out every other week. In it, I give out my best distractions of the week, be they what I'm reading, what I'm playing, or what I'm watching. I also try to give out a few bits of actionable advice in each newsletter, although your mileage is going to vary there. If that sounds like something you're interested in, head on over to hackingYourADHD.com/newsletter to sign up. And I also wanted to make sure you knew about our Patreon, which you can find at hackingYourADHD.com/Patreon. It's a pay-what-you-want model, meaning that all levels of Patreon get the same stuff. You can pay $0 or $2 or $3, and it's all the same. And you get access to the Hacking Your ADHD Discord. So, if either of those things sound like something you're interested in, head on over to hackingYourADHD.com/Patreon. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/@hackingYourADHD. And finally, if you'd like another way to support the show, the best way to do so is to tell someone about the show, especially if you think a particular episode would resonate with them. Just click the share button on your podcast player. And now for your moment of dad. I saw my neighbor stealing my socks off the clothesline. I was going to confront them, but then I got cold feet.